Hello, everyone, and welcome to Feed Science Podcast. Today, we're digging into something that a lot of companies are struggling with, and often without even knowing about it, and that's a disconnected software systems. You might not see it at first, but these silos between the formulation and the production and the compliance can be costing your company up to 15% of your profits, and that's a big number. Luckily today, our guest is here to break it all down and show us a way forward. Joining me is Lynn Verstrepen, Director, Product Management at Best Mix Systems Software. Best Mix is known for their empowering software solutions that help nutrition companies transform operations and eliminate waste and inefficiency. Lynn, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. And thank you for the introduction.
Okay. Well, hey, let's jump right into it here with that 15% number. That's a big loss. Where's that coming from?
It's often something that we see as a kind of invisible inefficiency, you could say. You have different systems. If you look to a feed producing company, different parts of the operations, for example, formulation software, but you also have production tools. Maybe you have compliance checks that you're doing in Word even. So a lot of these things are handled in separate worlds, in separate silos, you could say, and they are not really talking to each other. And that leads to errors, duplicated efforts, and it slows down the decision making. And you could say that even when everyone would do their job right, would do their job perfect, this kind of system setup itself will create a kind of leaking of value. Because if high-performing teams don't use tools that support them seamlessly, then still you have data re-entry from one system to another. Or maybe you have kind of version control issues or delayed feedback loops. So it looks maybe surprisingly that it's not a big crisis, but this kind of slow, hidden inefficiency is a steady bleed that you create. So in the end, as a total, the effect is bigger than you think.
And do most companies just accept this as normal?
I think people like to stay in the status quo because it's comfortable, and they assume it's just the cost of doing business. You always have a certain inefficiency, but having this kind of mindset is exactly what will hold you back. And once you start measuring those inefficiencies, whether it's now rework or startup waste or over-formulation of nutrients, for example, it will become clear that the cost of staying in the status quo is far higher than you realize. Take rework as an example. We have examples or case studies where we saw that 2% of the production time is wasted on redoing tasks that should have been completed or correctly done the first time that you encountered it. So these kind of things are really a hidden profit killer, you could say.
With its advanced industry-specific capabilities, Best Mix software empowers nutritionalists and formulators to optimize material allocation, manage recipes, and ensure data confidence for informed decision-making. By providing a comprehensive solution that integrates real-time data and strategic planning tools, Best Mix enables you to do the job efficiently and precisely. Focus on your core job and let Best Mix do the rest.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Well, let's dig a little deeper into some of the examples you mentioned. Over-formulation is one of the main issues.
It's one of the most common issues. Also something that for every nutritionist, it will ring a bell, let's say, over-formulation. Everybody takes a kind of bandwidth, an extra safety margin. And when it happens is you have, for example, outdated ingredient values that you're using, or you have averages that are not being up to date, and you're not using the live data from the feed mill. And if you have this scenario, what you do is you build in margin in the beginning in order that in the end you can deal with the flexibility that you still need to build in to deal with the variability that is coming in. But what a lot of people underestimate is that margin that you take in the beginning that costs a lot of money. It's a direct cost, in fact. So you're overdosing nutrients that the animals are even not needing. So that's a pity from cost point of view, but also from formulation point of view. Why would you do this?
Yeah, great question. And in the end, we end up just pumping it out of the pit and putting it back in the ground. So why does this keep happening?
People want to take that safety margin, and they do it because they don't see the effect later on. And the reason is that your formulation and your production often is disconnected. And there is no real-time feedback loop. Nutritionists don't see what's actually happening on the floor. They're working in isolation, and the same for the operators that are really making the feed. So imagine that you would have a fully integrated system that would solve that issue. Most companies that I've worked with in the past, they have two scenarios how they deal with this. And both scenarios are focused on integration. At one point could be that you say, I make sure that every batch that is coming in, I analyze that batch and I use the real batch values when I produce my production order. Of course, you need to be able to track down all the batches, to analyze all these individual batches, to store them individually also in the warehouse, and then re-optimize them in the production orders. So from logistical point of view, you need to have the facility to deal with that. But if you do this and it's highly integrated in your formulation, you work with live values of ingredients coming in. So it will always be way more accurate. So you have companies that are doing this approach. Some companies, they say, okay, for me, not possible. In the warehouse, it's not possible to store every individual batch. It's too cumbersome. I'm not doing that. But then they invest, in fact, in analyzing all the ingredients at intake, because then they know the exact average of every single ingredient. And if your averages are correct, also your formulation will be way more correct. Because if you're dealing with outdated averages, that's again too much margin, too much over-formulation that you need to do to safeguard, in fact, that end quality at the end. So two cases handled in a different way. And the case which you do at intake and monitoring all the ingredients coming in and then taking good average values is one way of dealing with it. Again, from integration point of view, very important to connect that real time with your formulation, that you always work with up-to-date values. Or you have an integration concept where you say, okay, whilst I formulate and produce at production level, I already take into account the real batch values. But both are based as a concept on integration that really needs to be there. Without integration, this kind of setup is not possible. And the companies that I encountered and do this, they really can have a huge impact on their bottom line. Sometimes they can even drop over formulation with 50%. So that can really lead to substantial savings if you could do this.
Yeah, that's huge. And when you layer that with production limitations being ignored during formulation,
it's always, if you formulate, you need to take into account what is happening in real practice, right? If you formulate something and it can't be actually produced on the line, what will people do? What will operators do? They will compensate with their own adjustments, and they're often then adding something more or adjusting something to keep the line running. But all these small tweaks that they're doing, every single tweak you do, that costs. That's inefficiency that you create. So it causes more cost, more inefficiency, but in the end also more variability in your end product, and that's something that you don't want.
Let's dig into rework. You mentioned earlier that 2% of production time is lost. That doesn't sound like much, but it adds up.
It adds up. If you break it down, the 2% often translates to, hundreds of hours, in fact, annually. It's not just time, it's wasted materials, lost production slots, delayed shipments. And when you add these up, the cost starts multiplying. And 2% may seem insignificant, but reducing again, for example, with 50%, you already unlock for a mid-average feed mill, let's say, $500,000 per year if you were to reduce the rework. So it's really important to focus on these assets or on these points.
And rework usually isn't tracked very well either, right?
No, it's again something, the status quo, the cost of doing business, let's say. A lot of companies that I speak with, they say, yeah, we have rework. It's just a fact. But then I think, yeah, but it's a hidden problem. And regardless of the fact that it's hard to quantify, you need to have a look. Why is it hard to quantify? Is it because your systems are not integrated? Because if they would be integrated and your formulation and your production data would be aligned, then you can start seeing trends. So sometimes even integration is not needed to prevent errors, but it's also to learn from your data. For example, which formulations causes a lot of time rework? What kind of combination of ingredients causes a lot of time the rework? Which machines are underperforming, for example? So we can do more analyzing in these concepts and do extensive research to see if you can detect patterns, something that typically when we talk about spotting patterns, we think already about AI, but also there AI can really mean a lot. We sometimes even say when we do a kind of training course, let's say, the AI can help you to see things that you didn't see. I think there's a nice example of there was a pet adoption story. And then they did a study, okay, why do we have a low adoption rate? And then most people think it's because the breed of the dog, for example, or the cuteness factor. And AI detected, no, it's the quality of pictures and the number of pictures that you put on your website. The adoption shelter changed that, and then they saw an increase in the adoption of their animals. And here again, that's now a very tangible example, let's say, but also in producing feed. And for example, the case of rework, there you can also have things happening that you don't think is an issue, but there is an underlying issue beneath. And if you can detect patterns because you have connected data, integrated data, you can be way more efficient in the end.
Oh, that makes sense. So Lynn, if a company's ready to move forward, what's that look like? What's integration look like?
I think it starts a bit, maybe first if we look to the people are handling these machines. I still believe that the operators are very skilled people. They are needed. But the issue is that skilled labor is a kind of, thing that is not massively present. And also when you are graduating, it's not that you're automatically a skilled operator. So we need to have a look more, how can we help operators and also formulators to produce feed in a way that we can support them. Because, for example, an experienced operator in Germany, we say they have Fingerspitzengefühl. It means a kind of an intuitive feel that they have to operate the machine. But how can we support them in order other people can also be onboarded? Because when we replace a seasoned operator or they're going somewhere else, it's almost unavoidable to get kind of losses because the process is just too complex to understand. Yeah, if this happens, then just do this. That's not possible. And again, for example, with AI, you can build kind of systems where, for example, there's a supportive tool for the operator and that it, for example, accurately predicts on the inputs, I see this and this and this setting. You need to put the pelletization machine like this with this setting, for example. So it guides the people on the floor, and this leads to a more stable production process. So the first step would be is guiding more the people on the floor, I would say, that they have a next level of guidance and support in their day-to-day workflow.
So I was going to say, well, let's talk a bit about Best Mix. What makes your platform different?
First of all, let's talk about true integration. True integration is something that is connecting everything. Connecting all your business critical processes on a single platform is just not only APIs between systems, but really a unified database. You need to unify everything coming in from your custom requests to your formulation, to your planning, your quality checks, and so on, in order that it can happen in one ecosystem. Because that makes reporting, audits, and so on way much easier. When everything is centralized, you can do what you want. If it's now learning from your data or preventing errors or being more efficient, it's the core essence, I would say. And if you look to Best Mix, I think truly that makes us different from competitors, because we build that kind of ecosystem. We build it for the feed industry, for pet food, for premix. And whilst others maybe, for example, focus on building a kind of, a module, for example, that is focusing on formulation or a build-on feature for quality, for example, we offer from A to Z the entire production cycle, formulation cycle of a company. So it's not patchwork, it's a full foundation. And then your data integrity becomes way better, and you have fewer workarounds and more automation that can help. And I think that sets us apart, I would say. And also a bit, we touched already a bit, the AI. I don't know if it's something that you encounter a lot in your podcast. Do they talk a lot about AI? Probably.
Yeah, we talk a lot about AI. I think we're still trying to figure out how to utilize it correctly, right?
And I think that's also something that sets us apart a bit, is we try to guide feed producing companies in this. Because there are pros and there are negative things around it. Let's say there are a lot of fuss around it. But if you look to it, we have a data-rich environment. And traditional approaches, they deliver value, they give you insights, but they are still in a kind of reactive mode. They are not in a proactive mode. And like the example that I already gave of the rework, for example, and detecting how you need to set your machine to have less rework, there is a possibility for AI. AI can give you that insights, especially when we have a kind of environment when the trends and the setups are becoming more complex. These kind of tools will help us to give us more insights and more proactive dashboards, for example, to illustrate us, okay, this is now happening. You need to configure this and this and this now to prevent, for example, waste, or to prevent maybe the line of stopping, for example. So, and why I say this is that AI alone is not a solution. It's a podcast about integration. Again, your solution of AI needs to be integrated inside your system, inside that ecosystem that you have. Because when you integrate it with your existing software, with your existing infrastructure, something that we do in our software as well, then you create a synergy. Then you create insights on the spot when you need them, in order that you can turn into proactivity. And that's important. So I think if you then understand the capabilities and the limitations also it sometimes have, you can really develop a realistic implementation strategy for this. And the key is it should address specific business goals that you have, and not purely, I just want to do something with AI. Sometimes we get this question as well. I want to do something with AI. What can you do for us? Then I always think, okay, but where do you have an issue? Where do you think you have an issue? And sometimes I even say, okay, imagine that you would look to your company and you think of your people running around. Imagine that you would take out certain people. Would it break down? If yes, then there you have an issue, because then you're relying on a person and not on a process. And then we can start fine-tuning the discussion and drilling down towards more the business challenge that you're looking for. So I would also say pick a good partner in this, because it's not because somebody can do something with AI that they will help you in the right challenge to overcome. And that's important, to integrate really the AI with your business challenge and how your company can benefit from it, because that's for every company also different.
Yeah, and boy, I really think AI is very interesting. As a guy who has been in feed for a long time, we've really just we've really only changed by multiplication. We do things, we have bigger equipment, we do things faster, but we really haven't changed our approach to anything we do. We're doing the same thing we were doing in the 80s. Today, we're just doing more of it and faster. And I think about that and the possibilities you bring here, helping people do things better and doing things that the people don't really need to be doing. And then the silo thing is huge. Every feed system I know has different software for everything. Disconnect. To bring that all together would be really fantastic. So, and it'd be a big change, be a real change. So before we wrap up, what's your message to nutrition companies that are still using all these disconnected systems?
I think sometimes, like I said, people like to stay in the status quo. And it's not because they like it. I think it's just in the business world, we are really used of doing this. Whilst in our personal life, I would say we rather make choices that make us move forward. It's not because, for example, your previous relationship didn't end up well that you don't believe in love anymore. But in businesses, we took maybe some risks already in the past and it didn't end up well. So let's stay for a few years then in the comfort zone. But even then, in those few years that you stay in the comfort zone, you lose opportunities. So my tip would be start small. If you feel that it's difficult to go for an extra step, let's say, even a small step is a step. So identify where your teams are duplicating efforts or losing time, for example. What would change if data was available? What would change if integration would be there? Imagine what would change if that person would not be there and you fall back to a process. Maybe that process is not there. That will really bring insights. And I think that's a takeaway. Dare to take steps. Even when they are small, you will get somewhere in the end. And that's important to stay dynamic.
Well, that's very powerful. So where can people learn more about Best Mix?
Just go to our website, I would say, to bestmix.com. There you find different case studies, also a way to get in touch with our team. We are always happy to explore more on what true integration can help and do for your business. We have a lot of experience in that. So if you want to know more, just visit our website, I would say.
Okay. Well, and do you have anything else you'd like to share today?
No, I'm happy to be back on an episode of Wise and Ethics. So it was nice to speak to you again.
Well, very nice to speak to you again, and hope we do it again sometime. And for our viewers, I hope you've learned something today or something's piqued your interest. And if it has, definitely share it with others and go take a look at what Best Mix has to offer. So for today, that's it. I'm your host, Bob, and may God bless you and have a good day.